I played every PlayStation 1 Disney game, and I'm here to rank every single game from worst to best. Now, when I say every, pretend there's a little asterisk by that word. I've decided to exclude all of the Japanese exclusive games as well as games aimed towards kindergartners and preschoolers, as these games were not entertaining enough for my live audience when I did my subathon. I also did not play Toy Story Racer because there's no way to beat the game in a decent amount of time. Rather, you have to play every track around 10 times or so to unlock all of the tracks in the game. Lastly, I didn't play Disney's Dinosaur because, yeah, I'd rather not, and nobody can make me play this game. Without further ado, here's my ranking.
Ugh, not very tasty.
Last on my list is The Little Mermaid 2. This game has you controlling Ariel and her daughter throughout the first 2 movies, and boy is this game boring. The whole premise of this game is basically to find certain collectibles or go from point A to point B in an extremely linear manner. This game is far too easy and extremely repetitive, offering barely any challenge or fun throughout the whole playthrough. I'm hard pressed to even call this a game, but I feel like I've already given this game way more screen time than it deserves.
Good guys, she started to smoke again.
Peter Pan. At first, this game was pretty harmless and inoffensive, but soon it became actual and literal torture to play. First off, the CGI in this game is so uncanny and gives me constant nightmares. Secondly, this game is extremely racist. I don't think I need to explain any further. Lastly, the gameplay sucks so badly. This entire game is basically a giant Crash Bandicoot 3 underwater level, and I feel bad insulting Crash 3 like that. A lot of levels in this game are designed with full health and pixie dust in mind, but whenever you die, you respawn with only 3 hearts and 1 bag of pixie dust, making it practically impossible to get through some levels. In the chase level with the ghost, it's literally impossible to do this damageless, so I had to exit the level, go all the way back to the shop on the world map, buy heart refills, and then I could finally go back to the chase level and beat it. The boss fights are some of the worst I've ever seen in a video game, with the crocodile fight specifically giving me a huge headache. The goal of this fight is to hit him 3 times with pixie dust to immobilize him, which allows you to do 1 hit of damage, and you have to repeat this process 2 more times. However, since you respawn with only 1 bag of pixie dust, you have to wait out 8 of these attacks from the crocodile. 8 to collect enough pixie dust to do damage to him only 1 time. Now, this fight isn't even the worst thing about this game. In the last set of levels, there are literal invisible objects that can damage and kill you, which you can make visible for a limited duration by blowing into a pan flute. The problem with this is how the hell are you supposed to have the foresight to know where these invisible objects are going to show up and when you're supposed to blow into the flute? Because of this, I have to constantly blow into the flute, and it becomes extremely tedious and stupid to get through the game. But hey, at least this game is a game, so it's not in last place. Please avoid this game at all costs if you want to save your sanity. Huh? Oh, really? An invisible spike? That's fantastic, bro. What amazing game design.
Have you come to say goodbye to Pooh too?
Poohs Party game is a blatant Crash Bash ripoff, with some extremely linear boards that kinda resemble Mario Party, at least if you squint and are maybe high on drugs. This game contains only 5 minigames in total, with some slight variations here and there. Of the 5 minigames, we have Pinball, which you have to hit some balls into your opponent's area. This is just like Crash Bash, but with a much worse scoring system. In Crash Bash, you're given a certain number that decreases whenever someone scores into your goal, which means if you're good at the game, you can survive consistently by just defending your goal. In the Pooh version of Pinball, you get points for scoring on other players, which makes this completely RNG. The game basically chooses who wins, and you can't do anything about it. The other games are not nearly as bad, but are extremely basic. There's a fruit collection minigame where you have to find a fruit of your color and then bring it back to your basket. There's a racing game where you have to drive around in a circle and complete 10 laps to win the race. There's a Bomberman type level where you have to hit your opponents 2 times to kill them, probably inspired by the tank minigame levels from Crash Bash. And lastly, there's a pumpkin picking minigame where you have to pick the most pumpkins before the time runs out, and you can hit your opponents away from the pumpkins to stop them. Overall, this game is extremely repetitive, and after 10 minutes of playing the game, I already wanted to play something else.
Big red rocks.
A Bug's Life is definitely one of the games of all time. This is a 3D puzzle platformer where your goal is to find and place seeds in certain locations, and find upgrades to those seeds to reach new areas. The concept for the gameplay is actually really interesting and unique, but the execution is where the game falls flat for me. First off, the game controls like a tank. The frame rate and especially the draw distance makes it really hard to move around and see things that you really need to see, and oftentimes led me to get lost and move around in a circle while trying to look for things. There are also enemies in the game, but dealing with them is a bit annoying since they respawn so quickly after being killed. The final boss fight is probably the most annoying part of the game for me, because he's invisible a lot of the times due to the draw distance. This game also doesn't have any 3D audio, so it's impossible to tell what direction he's in, so you kinda just have to wander around until he starts throwing projectiles at you. Still, this is the first game of the list that I wouldn't consider to be completely awful, but it still leaves a lot to be desired.
Miska, Muska, Mickey Mouse!
Mickey's Wild Adventure was the first Disney game created for the PS1, and is very similar to its Sega Mega Drive counterpart. This game is a 2D puzzle platformer, and a decent one at that. My main issue with this game is the lack of a proper save system, which is probably due to how old the game is. This game also has a really crazy difficulty spike, and is very hard to get through in general, so I opted to use the level select cheat and play the game on easy difficulty for my playthrough. This game has a really cute art style, cool music, and some quirky dialogue from Mickey.
Here, boy! Sure, I'm glad you won't.
However, I'm just not personally fond of the archaic gameplay and lack of quality of life features. The first Pete boss fight is what really stood out to me in terms of bad game design. This fight has you go back and forth over and over again to collect a pencil, and each time you do this, you have to watch a lengthy animation of a previous Mickey that you saved attacking Pete in some way. And Pete, for some reason, is just frozen like a statue and doesn't hurt you when you pass him. This fight is just super drawn out and super repetitive, and honestly should have ended after 2 or 3 cycles of this. But you have to collect a whopping 6 pencils to finally finish the fight. For the first PS1 Disney game, this certainly could have been a lot worse.
Booyah, Grandma! Booyah!
At number 20 is Walt Disney World Quest Magical Racing Tour. This game is heavily inspired by Crash Team Racing and Mario Kart, and features a wide selection of tracks and Disney characters to play as, most of which I've never even heard of in my life. On paper, this game is pretty cool. Throughout the game, you race through a variety of different tracks inspired by Disney World theme park rides, and each track has pretty nice visuals and music to jam out to. Driving mechanics are also not too shabby, with the mini turbo system being very satisfying if you're able to use it efficiently. However, the game is ranked very low on my list because of how awful the performance is on the PS1 version. This game ran at such a low and inconsistent frame rate that it made me nauseous and made the game extremely hard to control at times. I really wanted to enjoy this game a lot more than I did, and I'm sure that if I played the Sega Genesis version, I'd have very different thoughts about this game. However, and worst of all, why does Jiminy Cricket look like this? Why does he have teeth? I am so confused and very uncomfortable.
When I was a young warthog!
Very nice.
Thanks.
The Lion King Simba's Mighty Adventure is a 3D platformer which has you go through the events of The Lion King and The Lion King 2. Unfortunately, this game is just far too short to get a higher ranking than this, and controls like a tank. Nevertheless, there is some fun to be had. The overall atmosphere screams classic PS1 game, with various collectibles to unlock cutscenes from the movies, cute paw prints to collect to give Simba more lives, and a pretty fun pounce that you can use to damage enemies. I just wish the game lasted longer, and when I say this game is short, I mean I finished my casual playthrough of this game in just under 50 minutes. It would have been cool to see this game get way more fleshed out because it definitely had potential, just like this video has potential to get out to more people if you consider pressing that like and subscribe button. Thanks everyone.
Square. There is no place for a square, my lord.
Magical Tetris Challenge. This is probably the first ranking that'll have you scratching your head, especially with the games that I've criticized, but I don't care. I just love this version of Tetris. This game is very satisfying to play when you play it well, and it has some of the most catchy video game music that I've ever heard. The game is also very pleasant to look at and runs very smoothly, so that's a plus in my books. I will say though, I'm not really that great at Tetris, and even on the easiest difficulty, the CPU players are extremely cracked. It took me well over 10 attempts for a lot of the battles to get through the entire story, which by the way is extremely basic and really isn't worth talking about. There are also some really stupid and gigantic pieces that can just royally screw you over, so that's fun. Anyway, go play Magical Tetris. Thank you.
This isn't happening!
Hercules was the second Disney game released for the PS1, and it's surprisingly good all things considered. This is another 2D platformer and action game with some really basic 3D running levels. The movement and exploration in this game can be satisfying here and there, but the overall gameplay and combat feels pretty archaic. A lot of the basic enemies can get quite annoying and can whittle your health down so quickly if you don't come prepared. This game has some pretty interesting boss fights as well, with my favorite being the Medusa fight, where the goal of this fight is to get her to shoot a laser at some mirrors in order to turn herself into stone. The Hydra and Hades fights, on the other hand, are a bit more basic and repetitive, but still not horrible. My least favorite part of this game is the big flying level with the Pegasus. This level just goes on for way too long and has a lot of off-screen objects and enemies that are really hard to avoid sometimes, and there are checkpoints in the level that are completely missable and extremely punishing if you die without finding them. Lastly, this game has a pretty archaic save system where you essentially have to enter in a code at the title screen in order to access the level that you game overed in. So if you're playing this on an actual console, you'll be using Google a lot of the time. Thankfully, I played this game on emulator and made a save state at the beginning of each level. Overall though, this is still not a bad game. The Jungle Book Rhythm and Groove is a rhythm game based around the movie's plot. This is a very lighthearted game with some great remixes of songs that you'll definitely recognize, and also features some new and original songs. The game is pretty easy for music enthusiasts like me, but you can unlock a harder difficulty after beating the game the first time. My favorite thing about this game is the unique power-up mechanic, where in between phrases you can input some special inputs to activate a random power-up. Sometimes you'll get a firewall that plays the notes automatically for you to give your hands a break. Other times you'll get a special challenge or double points for a limited amount of time. This really helps to spice up the gameplay and prevents it from getting too boring or repetitive. This game is certainly worth playing if you're a fan of the Jungle Book. Goofy's Funhouse is a very silly and lighthearted game where you explore Goofy's house and find specific things that he's looking for in order to unlock a minigame. It's really cool how many interactable objects there are, and how much unique dialogue you'll hear by interacting with said objects. Oh! Okay, that was funny. The minigames are also pretty fun and range from golfing, fishing, whack-a-mole, and driving a car. Since Goofy is my favorite Disney character, this game was a great celebration of all things Goofy. My only real complaint is the extremely low frame rate. Besides that, I really enjoyed this game and I recommend it to any Goofy fans.
Butter dog, the dog with the butter dog, got the butter on him.
101 Dalmatians 2 is a 2.5D puzzle adventure game where you control Patch and try to save all of your puppy siblings. This game reuses a lot of assets from the 102 Dalmatians PS1 game, but isn't as fun to be honest. Still, I would consider this game and any game ranked above this to be good and worth trying. Most of the levels in this game have you free a specific amount of puppies from these wooden crates, or simply just make it to the end of the level. This game also has some pretty quick movement with a roll mechanic, which I found myself enjoying quite a bit. There are also several puzzles in this game where you have to explore the area in search of keys and open some doors in a certain order to make it to the end. At the end of each level, the game congratulates you with a newspaper headline, which I thought was pretty creative. And I also had this really funny moment happen. Two more. Okay. Well done, Patch. It's just a picture of me drowned in the water.
Bouncy, trouncy, flouncy, pouncy, fun, 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 fun. But the most wonderful things about Tiggers is I'm the only one.
Tiggers Honey Hunt is a 2D platformer featuring our boy Tigger as our playable character. This game is pretty short, but there's a good amount of fun to be had. First off, the game looks absolutely gorgeous for a PS1 game, and the art style really helps to make this game shine. The controls are nice and snappy, the game usually runs at a smooth 60 frames per second, and the movement is really fun too. If you hold a directional button, Tigger's movement speed is very fast, and throughout the game you also unlock extra movement abilities, such as the ability to wind up your tail like a spring and do a big bounce, and the ability to hover in the air for a little bit by flapping Tigger's arms. There are also 3 minigames that are played in between platforming sections. The first one has you play Simon Says with Rabbit and has some really silly animations. This minigame is a little drawn out though. The second minigame is Pooh Sticks, where you and Pooh have to throw a stick into the water, and whichever stick comes back first is the winner. You can completely cheese this minigame though by just not throwing the stick as far as Pooh, and you'll win every single time. The last minigame is Rock Paper Scissors against Owl, which you can cheat in by watching what Owl is about to play and just picking the opposite option. This is overall a fun, light platformer and takes no longer than 1 or 2 hours to complete, but is ranked relatively high due to the visuals, performance, and controls.
Now, it's time for the opening stage!
Dance Dance Revolution Disney Mix is exactly what it sounds like. It is a DDR game with controller and dance pad support that features various popular Disney songs, such as the Mickey Mouse song, It's a Small World, and Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. This game starts with 2 difficulty options, and once you clear every song on Trick Mode, you unlock Maniac Mode, which is much more difficult. There are also some non-Disney songs thrown in for good measure. I love all of the remixes, and I especially love the Disney characters that appear in the background to jam with the music. For example, we have Chip and Dale constantly switching places, Mickey Mouse all swagged out, and Pluto throwing it back. If I have this on screen for too long, this video might get demonetized.
10,000 years will give you such a crick in the neck.
Aladdinnaziras Revenge is a fully fledged 3D action and adventure game where Aladdin must save Jasmine and defeat Jafar's sister Nazira, who is trying to bring Jafar back to life to take over the world. This game is super expansive and takes a while to beat. The core gameplay of this game is very fun with Zelda-like puzzles and combat. I really wanted to rank this game higher, but the more I played it, the more I started to detest just how horrible the save system in this game is. The way it works is throughout each level there are genie tokens that you can collect. After beating the level, you can then spin Genie slot machine for every token that you found, and you have the chance to get an extra life or an extra continue. If you run out of lives in a level and get a game over, you can use a continue to continue the game from the beginning of the level. But if you run out of continues, you get taken back to the title screen and you have to load your last save. This is extremely tedious when you have 0 lives and 0 continues left, and you get taken back to the title screen every single time that you die. It's especially rough at the end of the game, where the difficulty spikes tremendously. Also, the final boss fight for this game leaves a lot to be desired. It's stupidly repetitive and has you go into first person to throw projectiles at Jafar's head, but the aiming mechanic is honestly really bad. Another complaint I have is that throughout each level there are these red diamonds that you can find, and after completing the level you can do a minigame challenge where you have to collect 100 coins before the time runs out. If you collect 100 coins successfully, you get rewarded with a blue diamond, and my chat and I were never able to figure out what these blue diamonds are even for. They don't give you any extra lives or continues, so I found myself just killing myself during these minigames to progress through the game faster, since I got no value out of these minigames anyway. This game was a very great concept, and future Disney releases would see this game style expanded upon and greatly polished. You'll see these games later on in the ranking.
I have no heart. I don't know my friends. I have no heart and no friends.
To kick off our top 10, we have Tarzan. This is a classic 2D and 3D platformer featuring Tarzan as we play through the events of the movie. The gameplay here is very well done, and the visuals are great for the PS1 era. The movement and combat is pretty decent too, with the ability to run, jump, stab things with a knife, throw different kinds of fruit, and smash broken parts of the ground to find secrets. Each level also contains 4 pieces of Jane's sketch, and after you collect all 4 and beat the level, you get to play a fun minigame and collect an extra life or 2. This game's difficulty also progresses very naturally, getting more and more difficult as time went on. My only gripe with this game was this level where you have to defeat Clayton's minions. The enemies here are just super aggressive, and it felt impossible to deal with them without dying or taking a lot of damage. This game also has a pretty similar save system to Aladdin, where you get taken to the title screen and have to reload the save to continue if you game over. But because of the natural difficulty progression and the ability to farm lives in previous levels, this wasn't nearly as punishing as it was in Aladdin.
This might be a good spot to find some ingredients.
Donald Duck Goin' Quackers is a 3D platformer that is a blatant ripoff of Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. Some of you from Europe will know this game as Donald Duck Quack Attack. Despite this game being a blatant Crash clone, most of the gameplay is done pretty well. There are 4 warp rooms in this game with 4 levels each and a boss fight. Each boss fight was pretty well done, and I actually prefer these fights to most of the Crash Warped boss fights, since there's a good amount of difficulty here. The platforming levels are very similar to Crash 3 as well, where instead of a crystal you have to find a power orb in order to beat each level. However, some of these orbs are very well hidden, some of which I had to use a guide for in order to find. Oh, it's in here! That's so sneaky. I'm actually not a big fan of this and wish every orb was directly in my path, but I digress. You can also collect 3 toys in each level by hitting a magic book, which makes the toy appear for a limited time, and after collecting each toy, Donald shakes his booty to celebrate. After collecting all 3 toys, Donald shakes his booty 3 times to celebrate. Okay. This game is amazing. The final boss of this game was also very exhilarating. It's basically a ripoff from Entropy from Crash 3, but was much more difficult, and I really enjoyed this. My only real issue with this game is how many times my jump inputs got dropped because of lag. Besides that, this game is great.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
Monsters Inc. Scream Team is a 3D platformer featuring Mike and Sully as they are enlisted into a training program in order to get their certificates and start working at Monsters Inc. The goal of each level is to collect a certain amount of goo and then scare a certain amount of bots to complete the level. I ended up using Mike throughout most of the game because of his increased movement speed, and it was really fun. Mike can roll really quickly as his attack and do a swift double jump. You can also pounce on enemies in the air to destroy them. After every 4 levels, there's a race with Randall, which is really fun as well. There are some sketchy parts of the races though. For example, there's this boost pad that makes Mike go much faster, but if you touch it, getting over the gap becomes much harder for some reason, so I just opted to avoid the boost pad entirely. The scare mechanic also became a bit tedious as time went on, but that tediousness is not nearly as bad as games I mentioned earlier. Overall, this game is a pretty solid collectathon and is definitely worth playing if you're a Monsters Inc. fan.
There's only room in my life for one lady, Star Command.
Buzz Lightyear of Star Command is a 3D platformer, action, and racing game based on the show of the same name. This game is probably the most unique that I've played on this list, and I haven't seen any other game in this kind of style. The goal of each level is to make it to the end of the level before the villain does or before the time runs out. If the time runs out, you fail. If you make it to the finish line before the villain gets there, your friend Miranova shows up to weaken the boss, after which you must finish it off. Every level has 5 medal points that you can collect by completing various tasks, such as defeating the boss, completing the time trial quickly, and finding all of the pieces of XR. A total of 36 points are required to complete the game. I honestly had a lot of fun playing this game. The movement and weapon upgrades are really fun to play around with, and the time trials had a nice level of difficulty to them, so it was very fun to figure out the most optimal routing for the silver medals worth half a point. While most of the levels had really nice pacing to them, the same thing cannot be said about the Wirewolf level. This level has you doing very many mob fights against really annoying enemies before the time runs out, and makes you start the level from the very beginning if you fail at any point. This level is absolutely brutal and just takes way too long to complete. Lastly, we have the Emperor Zurg fight, which was very tedious because of how much damage you have to do to kill him. Like, look at how small his health bar is here, and he's still not dead. Overall, I really admire this game's creativity, and I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. Although, there is a Toy Story game for PS1 that is much better than this.
Oh, hi.
Lilo and Stitch Trouble in Paradise is what I like to call a Crash Bandicoot clone done right. What I mean by this is that it takes a lot of elements inspired from the Crash Bandicoot series, but adds some cool unique mechanics to it. This game has you swapping between Lilo and Stitch every other level, and both characters play in different ways. My favorite character to play as is Stitch, because he has a very cool mechanic where if you fill up his coffee meter all the way, you can start rolling really quickly and even bounce over water. You can also cancel the roll mid-air and jump out of it, which makes the movement with Stitch very fun. Stitch can also spit acid and do a Crash Bandicoot spin. Lilo's gameplay is a bit more basic. She can use voodoo to destroy enemies and do a cool ground pound that has forward momentum. There are also a few chase levels in the game, and while in Crash Bandicoot you just have to run away from the enemy, in this game you actually have to dodge projectiles while running away. I think this is a really fun twist, and coupled with the unique movement mechanics, these levels can be quite fun. The music in this game is also amazing. Huge shoutouts to the composer John Guscott for making such great tunes, including the one that you're listening to right now.
Hey, let me get a minute. Hey, let me get one too. Hey, let me hold one.
Yeah, you get that right there. What the dog doing?
Kicking off my top 5, we have 102 Dalmatians, Puppies to the Rescue. This is a 3D platformer featuring Oddball and Domino as our playable characters. The goal of each level is to save some of our puppy siblings and find the exit to move on to the next level. Throughout each level are optional collectibles that you can find, and various enemies can be encountered in the form of evil toys from Cruella's Toy Factory. In between certain levels, you also fight Cruella de Vil, and while these fights are pretty basic, they're not bad. The main thing I love about this game is just how fun and snappy this game feels to play. The movement with the roll mechanic is extremely fast and thrilling, and reminds me a lot of Spyro the Dragon. The music in this game is pretty charming as well. I really like the pacing in this game and didn't get bored for a single second. I hear this game has a really cool speedrun as well, so I highly recommend checking it out.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity. Farewell.
Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue is a 3D platformer and collectathon game. This game is extremely well done and takes huge inspiration from other N64 era games like Super Mario 64. In this game, you control Buzz Lightyear throughout various familiar locations within the Toy Story movies, such as Andy's house, Pizza Planet, as well as Al's Toy Bar. The goal of each level is to collect Pizza Planet tokens by completing various tasks, such as finding 50 coins for ham, competing in a race with RC, finding 5 of a specific lost toy, or fighting a boss. Each level has 5 tokens you can find, and you need at least 40 tokens on the PS1 version in order to beat the game. I guess they thought Nintendo gamers wouldn't be as good and nerfed the requirements down to 30 on the N64 version. The gameplay here is extremely fun and makes for a certified classic. There's a lot of fun platforming and slight puzzle solving involved, with the ability to double jump, grab ledges, slide down zip lines, and more. And the game controls very well. Unfortunately, there's no direct camera control, but that didn't become too much of an issue throughout most of my playthrough. It's also just fun to explore each familiar area and jam out to the very catchy soundtrack. I highly recommend this game for any Toy Story lovers out there.
Allow me to handle this.
To kick off my top 3, we have Treasure Planet. Treasure Planet is a 3D platformer which takes place during the events of the movie. This game features familiar level design similar to the Spyro the Dragon series. I absolutely loved playing this game. The game controlled like butter, and was the only game in the list that had analog camera control. The core gameplay was also a blast. Similar to Toy Story 2, this game's levels has 5 Treasure Planet tokens that you can collect by completing various tasks, ranging from finding all of the pieces of the map, helping someone through a fun minigame, finding 4 yellow diamonds and exchanging them for a token, or getting a fast time in the hoverboard time trials, which are super fun by the way. The movement in this game is pretty basic, but was extremely fun to pull off. From Jim's moveset, we have a double jump, paraglider, a sword attack, a jump attack, and a gun, which when powered up allows you to shoot faraway objects in first person. My favorite part of the game though was definitely the boss fight against John Silver. Something about it was very satisfying, and it even had checkpoints after certain phases of the fight. Not to mention, the music and the visuals for this game are really good for the time it was released.
Oh yeah, it's all coming together.
The Emperor's New Groove. This game is incredible and was so close to being my number one. The Emperor's New Groove is a 3D puzzle platformer featuring Emperor Cusco. Right off the bat, this game's humor is extremely top-notch, and this is a common theme throughout the entire playthrough. There are so many hilarious pieces of dialogue and fourth wall breaks that made me and my chat crack up, so here are a few good examples. So balloons are the collectibles that I
My
need?
dad tells me you can use your camera buttons to rotate the camera. I don't even know what a camera is.
Okay, I love that. That's a funny fourth wall break.
Apparently, you can jump when you press your jump button, but I can't find my jump button.
That's so funny, dude. I can't find my jump button.
This pad raises the columns to form steps. Once they're triggered, you better be quick before they lower again.
Ever thought of making them stay up for good when you press the pad?
Bro.
No.
Don't tell me. You got the brains in the family.
Oh, okay, this game is top notch. This game is top notch.
To open some village doors, you have to put a pot on a pad. Llamas pick up pots by pressing their action button.
How do you get here so fast?
Hey, it's a game.
Don't get cocky, kid.
Oh my god, dude, it's amazing. Alright, but what about the gameplay? I'm happy to report that the gameplay is super fun as well. This game plays very similarly to Spyro the Dragon. Basically, you can run around as a llama and charge into things to break them, fight various enemies, and overcome certain platforming obstacles. The controls feel really snappy and grounded. Each level introduces new but fun gimmicks to the platform puzzles, and there's also good camera control. This is also a fully fleshed out game similar to the Aladdin game that I covered earlier, and pretty much goes through every part of the movie with some extra added humor here and there. There's so much content to experience, and I implore anyone watching this video to play this game. I'd recommend playing this while your friends or family watch, so you can all have a good laugh together. Honestly, going into this quest to play all of these PS1 Disney games, I was not expecting Atlantis: The Lost Empire to be at the top of my list. Before playing this game, I hadn't even seen the movie, but this game made me fall in love with Atlantis and all of its story, characters, and set pieces. Atlantis is a 3D action and adventure game featuring Milo Thatch and various members of his crew as playable characters on their quest to find the lost city of Atlantis. This game started off a bit slow for me, but the more I played it, the more I found myself enjoying it. Atlantis is very much like a 3D Legend of Zelda game, with fully fleshed out dungeons, puzzles, and exploration. Throughout the game, you can switch to various characters in Milo's crew, who all have very unique attributes to them. For instance, Milo is very good at deciphering Atlantean texts. Audrey can light up a dark room with her flare gun, Vinny can blow up certain structures to clear the way, and Mole can dig things up from holes. This game also contains very fun driving and flying levels, a robust inventory system where you can use key items and food, and you can also combine these crystals with your weapon to give them special attributes. My favorite level in this game was definitely the Secret Swim level, which is a fully fleshed out water temple. The music in this game is very lovely as well. A majority of the music serves to complement the gameplay and isn't super in your face. It's not the most catchy music, but does a fantastic job adding to the overall atmosphere of each area. If there's one PS1 game I'd recommend people play, it is definitely Atlantis. But what do you guys think? I'd be really keen to see which of these games you had fond memories of growing up, so let me know in the comments. Huge thanks to our channel members for supporting my YouTube endeavors, and if anyone else would like to receive a shout out in my next video, feel free to press the join button for just $4.99 per month. I hope you all have a wonderful day.